All right, hello and welcome to the very last video in this series called The Future of Great Planet Earth with me, James Preston, and I'm really excited to share this one with you. This is probably my favorite, maybe my second favorite behind the New Covenant, but one of my favorite studies and one of my favorite subjects to talk about. So this one's going to be really good. But just before we get into it, I just wanted to share with you some of the books that have helped me along the way. A lot of the material you've seen on the slides comes from these books and this material, so that you know it's not just all the internet and articles on the internet, Wikipedia and that kind of stuff. It's certainly not just that. There's been a lot of reading, and it took me weeks and months to get to the place of where I was even ready to start writing, let alone start teaching on this stuff. So obviously my Bible, I've got at least 2 translations, actually had 4 translations at home, but they're not with me here in the recording of this video. But my trusted NIV, love my NIV, especially a cross-reference Bible, so important. NLT helps me just flow along nicely, New Living Translation. ESV I use a lot as well for literal translation and literal translating of the Greek into the English. And then the Message also just helps kind of give a bit of context to what I'm reading. So I use those, and then of course the internet for other translations. And then probably the best one I would suggest is Timothy Paul Jones. Dr. Timothy Paul Jones wrote a book there called The 4 Views of the End Times. And he does the same thing. I don't know if that's too bright. I can't really see over there. But he does the same thing that I do in going through historical premillennialism, amillennialism, dispensational premillennialism, and post-millennialism. So comprehensive and yet so concise. Incredibly concise, very easy read. Took me a week to read. I'm a slow reader, I must tell you. I'm a very slow reader. And then the second most prominent book for me, which actually kicked off the whole study for me, is this book called Victorious Eschatology. And I don't know if I even told you this, but the word eschatology means the study of the end times. So these guys, I mean, look how thick this book is. These guys get deep into eschatology and show you that we can have a victorious view on the end times. So that's awesome. And it's written by great guys named Harold Earburl and Martin Trench. A lot of my material on Revelation comes from this. A lot of my material on Matthew 24 comes from this book as well. So awesome, and they just really have such a hopeful view about the end of the world, which is actually going to be great. It's going to be a great thing. Jesus is going to come back, and we're going to rule on earth. It's beautiful. Then a very theological book. This is deeply theological. It's a scholarly book, requires focus and, really get through it. But it's a great book. I turn to it a lot. It's called The 4 Views on the Book of Revelation. And those are, it is written here because it's not exactly what I've taught about. But obviously preterism I've spoken about. Let's have a look if it has it here. Yeah, here we go. The preterist understanding, the idealist understanding, the classical dispensationalist, futurist understanding, and progressive dispensationalist understanding. So those 4 views on the Revelation given by people who actually support those views. So the one view is written by Kenneth L. Gentry Jr. The one view is written by Sam Hanstra Jr. The other view is written by Marvin Pate, and the other one by Robert L. Thomas. So that is also a great resource. And then this one, given to me by my senior pastor and friend Steve Wheeler. This is a fantastic read as well. George E. Curry and Richard Hogue write a book called The Sign of the Kingdom about Matthew chapter 24. Really awesome book. Matthew 24 and 25 really opens your eyes to see a lot of what I spoke about in Matthew 24 and 25. Really is something to consider, because a lot of it was fulfilled at the destruction of Jerusalem. So those books were awesome. I want to thank every single one of the authors. I'm going to tweet a lot of you and email a lot of you. Dr. Timothy Paul Jones, I'm going to tweet you, so look out for that. I really just want to say thank you, guys. If any of you guys ever watch this, I want to say thank you. I know how much time it's taken me to put this series together, how much time it's taken me to write the book. Oh my gosh, I'm still not written the book, and it's the 11th of December. So yeah, I just am amazed at these incredible books you guys have written, and I want to say well done, and I want to say thank you so much for for putting that effort in so that we can believe in a great future. So bless you guys. I think I'm going to move the books out of shot there for you guys. I'll just put them down over here. And let's get straight into the final video of this study on the end times. So we're looking at chapter 10, Will the World End Soon? And what can we expect? So as you can see, my slide just gets straight into it. So let's do it. Number one, a Christian should never fear in their heart. Let's have a look at a couple of passages here. 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 says, For God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power, love, and self-control. And so I want to ask you, you have a spirit inside of you that is not a spirit of fear. So if you have a spirit inside of you that's fearing, then, my friend, it's not from the Spirit of God. If you're watching the news and saying, oh, my word, the world's getting worse and things are going to happen, it's terrible, then, my friend, that is not the Spirit of God. You have the Spirit of God inside, which you need to tap into, because that Spirit does not have a spirit of fear. And, in fact, it's a spirit of power. So if you see that stuff on TV and in the newspapers, you should have a spirit of power rise up and say, hang on a second, we can overcome this. 1 John 4:18 says, there is no fear in love. But perfect love, and we know that God is love, perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not been perfected in love. My friend, I want to tell you that there is no fear in God. And so God would not set things up for you to fear. There is nothing to fear as a child of God. You don't have to fear because God is looking after you. God has got your back, and there is nothing to worry about. It is not our portion as Christians. Secondly, God has given us the world as our inheritance. So the enemy's rise of power is both illegal and it's temporary. Romans 4:13 says this, For the promise to Abraham and his offspring that he would be heir of the world did not come through the law, but through the righteousness of faith. So this is the inheritance that Abraham received, that he would be heir of the world. Now, you may say, yeah, but that's to Abraham. That's not to us. Do you know what Galatians says? Well, we're going to have a look at it. Let me confirm it a little bit more before I get into Galatians. Look at Psalm 115, verse 16. The heavens are the Lord's heavens, but the earth he has given to the children of man. Now, that's key for us to understand. God rules the heavens and the spirit realm, but earth belongs to you and I. It's why Jesus had to redeem mankind as a man. God couldn't just wave a magic wand and fix us. Jesus had to redeem us because the earth belonged to us. And it had to be a man that redeemed mankind. Right, so here we go. Have a look at this. So you may say, yeah, but that's to the Jews or that's to Abraham. Look at what Galatians 3:14 says. So that in Christ, the blessing of Abraham might come to the Gentiles as well, so that we might receive the promised Spirit through faith. My friend, I want to tell you that that promise of Romans 4:13, that he was an heir of the world, applies to us as well. And as you can see, it's through the Spirit that we enter into that inheritance. That's why we have a spirit of power, because we need the Holy Spirit if we're to overcome all the negativity and pessimism around us. So my friend, again, the promise of Abraham being an heir of the world belongs to you as well. The world is your inheritance. Thirdly, history is full of horrendous events, yet Jesus didn't come back. What makes us think current events are any different? I want to run you through a couple of events, just a few events for us to consider and say, hey, hang on a second. Actually, Jesus didn't come back then. Why would he come back now? We need to think about this. Firstly, as I described to you, desolation of Jerusalem in 70 AD. It was horrific, worse than what we've seen in possibly all of history. The way the streets ran with blood, it was just terrible. A fellow theologian and author, Jonathan Welton, actually writes how when he was reading some of the stories written by Josephus and some of the other works of the historians about what happened in 70 AD, every time he reads it, he actually weeps at how disgusting the decimation actually was. And then Pompeii, 79 AD, a huge earthquake, volcano, absolutely destroyed Pompeii. Now, if that had made the news, if there was news back then, that would have been worldwide headlines. It destroyed an entire city, friends. The entire city. We're not just talking World Trade Center, 9/11, 2 buildings. We're talking an entire city wiped out by an earthquake. We haven't seen that in recent times. There was the great earthquake of 1906 in San Francisco, but that didn't even wipe out the whole city. Pompeii wiped out the whole city. That's serious. Jesus didn't come back then. Then, of course, we know the rise of Islam was quite a serious, forceful advancement. We know that Muhammad and some of his soldiers would just go up to people and they would say, if you do not become a Muslim, we're going to kill you. And it was very violent. It was a violent rise of a religion which discredited Jesus as the Son of God. And that was in the late 500s. We're talking 1,500 years ago. If that was happening now, people get worried about ISIS now, but the rise of Islam happened so quickly because it was so violent. And Jesus didn't come back. What makes us think he's going to come back now? Because of those events. The Crusades, same thing. If you think it was just the Muslims, it was those who were also influenced by religion for Christianity. Christians can get religious too. Well, the Crusaders took verses out of context and they went in and they wiped out Muslims left, right, and center. It was also horrific. What the Crusaders did, some of the things they did to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and those areas, northern Morocco, those kind of areas, it was horrendous. And so, again, terrible events, but Jesus didn't come back. Then, what about the bubonic plague? People are scared of Ebola now, or Ebola now. My mom tells me I need to say it Ebola, not Ebola. Yes, that's correct. But people are scared of Ebola now. But the bubonic plague killed 1/3 of the world's population. You're talking about a worldwide virus that there was nothing we could do. It just took out the whole population. And people are worried now about viruses and swine flu and this one and that one, but it's got nothing on what the bubonic plague did. And that was, 400 years ago? And again, Jesus didn't come back. We're still here. The American Civil War, also horrendous, atrocious. 1/3 of the troops died, and it was literally almost all the men who were troops. So, and again, there were wars, rumors of wars, and so if it was applying to this, why didn't Jesus come back then? And of course, we know World Wars 1 and 2. Again, that's now been 100 years come and gone. 100 years come and gone since World War 1 and 2. We still haven't seen World War 3, and we still haven't seen the return of Jesus. Now, please don't hear my cynicism and reject what I'm saying. I don't mean to be cynical, but I'm just trying to point out to you that, hang on a second, let's just stop and go, wait. So much bad stuff has happened in the past. What makes us think that now the bad events are signs of the times today? Why would Ebola be a sign of the times if the bubonic plague wasn't a sign of the times, when bubonic plague was clearly worse? Why would ISIS be a sign of the times if the Crusades or the rise of Islam wasn't a sign of the times? Friends, we have to be logical about how we approach what we believe. We really do. And so, Jesus is coming back. I really believe that. But we don't know when. We have to remember that. There are no signs of the times of when Jesus is coming back. We just have to hope. We just have to get on with our job, which is inheriting the world, releasing the fragrance of Christ to the world, and making this world a better place. We have to get on with our job and not worry about looking for signs of the times. I think so much of Christianity is distracted by the signs of the times that they've lost sight of why we're even here. We're here to change the world, to make it a better place. I tell you what, right now, we are here to bring an answer to Ebola. We're here to bring an answer to the financial instability in economics today. We're here to bring an answer to poverty. We're here to bring an answer to cancer. We are here to change the world, not figure out when Jesus is going to come back. We just get on with our job, and then Jesus will come back when we least expect it. Let's focus on what we're called to do. So excuse me if I sound cynical, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from. Fourthly, the gospel is a message of hope and power. It's not a message of fear and defeat. So we need to move in the opposite spirit. Romans 1:16 and 17, Paul says, I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first, and then to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith. As it is written, the righteous shall live by faith. Friends, the gospel is a powerful message, and the gospel alone is the power of God. I tell you what, running around telling people the world's going to end, and that this is a sign of the times, and Ebola is going to take us all out, and ISIS are going to take us all out, I tell you what, that is not a powerful message. The gospel is a powerful message, and we must not lose sight of that fact. All right, now what I want to do is I want to show you how the world is actually getting better. Okay? You may not agree with me on this, you may not believe that, but I want to show you some facts that prove the world is getting better. The world is not getting worse. The world is actually getting better, my friends, and history shows us this. So, let's have a look at it. Firstly, civil rights. All right? Until August 26, 1960, women in America could not even vote. Now think about that. People get so worried about Afghanistan and what's going on in the Middle East. You know, women have no rights. But friends, in America, as recently as 1960, women couldn't even vote. And the fact is, today, women are finding their way into the world's marketplaces in record numbers, even in Middle Eastern countries. What about from 1654 to 1863, slavery was legal throughout most of the Western world. Today, slavery is an abomination. People of color can vote in countries where only 60 years ago they couldn't even sit on the same bench, on the same beach. America has so advanced that a man of color leads their government for the first time ever. In 1900, no country had universal suffrage, meaning the right for all its adult citizens to vote. In 1900, not a single country, friends. That's only 114 years ago. Today, only 12.4% of the world's population have limited suffrage. That is huge. That is 87.6% of the world's population have universal suffrage, meaning they can vote for whichever party they want to vote for. They live in democracy. 44.1% of the world's population live in nations deemed free by the Freedom House, and another 18.6% live in nations deemed partly free. What about this one? 200 years ago, the age of sexual consent in much of even the Western world was 10 years old. I mean, that's scary. 200 years ago. Now, most countries it's 18. Some it's 16 because they're trying to figure out when do people have their own right to choose and things like that. But 10 years old only 200 years ago. You know, the world is getting better, friends. Up until a few decades ago, human sacrifices were accepted in many cultures, most notably in South American culture up to a few hundred years ago. Today, human sacrifices are unheard of in the world. Why? Because the world's getting better. What about standards of society? How about this for a fact? I found this one. Prostitution in New York City was so rife 200 years ago that there was one prostitute for every 64 men. That's like 2% of 2% of the population of men in New York City was the same amount of how many prostitutes there were in the city. That is crazy. That is a lot of prostitutes on the street of New York. Today, those numbers don't even compare. Because why? The world's getting better, friends. What about this one? Men could legally beat their wives as long as they didn't maim or kill them. That's crazy. Today, you can't even hit your own child. 200 years ago, 1/5 of all pregnancies in the USA was aborted. People say today, oh no, there's so much abortion. Abortion is horrendous, or abortion is terrible. 200 years ago, 20% of all pregnancies were aborted. We've just got to remember that actually the past was also pretty horrendous, as well as we're seeing bad stuff now, but the past was also just as bad. I want to show you some interesting stats about worship around the world. And I don't know if I've got it here, some of the key ones, but look at African and Asian Australian tribes. They worship nature and demonically inspired ancestors. Even today, here in Africa, there is a lot of ancestral worship, but more and more and more, as society progresses, this is becoming frowned upon more and more. South American tribes offered hundreds of thousands of human sacrifices, including babies, every year, even as recently as 200 years ago. The Roman Empire, 40% of the population were slaves. Homosexuality was commonplace in the Roman Empire, especially between master and slave. I mean, we saw that between Nero and his servant. He had him castrated and married the guy. I mean, and he was 13 years old. You can't tell me that we're seeing that now. That was the king. That was the emperor. Come on. Most Romans and Greeks worshipped many gods. Juno, Neptune, Zeus. Now we see those kind of idolatry worship unheard of. It's basically, people have become more and more enlightened, and it's either the gospel, atheism, or maybe Islam or Judaism. But the reality is, it's become a lot more intellectually understood. It's not just a blind, crazy, you know what, we're just going to worship this God on a hill. We're going to worship the sun. We're going to worship the stars. No, if we believe in Yahweh, it's because there is intellectual proof for what happened in the Old Testament, Jesus as the Christ, the Son of the living God. So Christianity is one of in fact, the biggest religion in the world today. And yet, only a few hundred years ago, this wasn't the case. Have a look at some poverty stats. These are incredible. The average person has never been better fed than they are today. Between 1961 and 2002, the world's average daily food supply increased by 24%. And in developing nations, it increased by 38% per person. Can't tell me the world's not getting better there. Chronic malnourishment, chronic undernourishment in developing nations declined from 37% to 17% in the same period. We're on a course for greatness here, friends. Since 1950, greater agricultural productivity and international trade has caused inflation-adjusted prices of food commodities to decline by, get this, 75%. By 2035, the United Nations predicts there will be no poor countries left in the world. That is huge. What a trajectory that we're actually on, friends. And then look at Christianity's advance. It's estimated that more than 200,000 people come to Christ every single day. 20,000 people in China every day come to Christ. 35,000 people in South America every day. A total of 1 million new Christians come to Christ every week. Friends, this is an explosion. It is happening around the world. I am telling you now, we do not have to fear. Because it all started with one small seed in the land of Judea 2,000 years ago. And here it is spreading today at the rate of 1 million people per week. And you may say, oh yes, but that's a sign of the times. Well, no, because if you watched my study of Matthew 24, Jesus wasn't talking about the future. He was talking about that day when Jerusalem got destroyed. And so a sign of the times was the gospel had already gone out to all the nations. And I've proved that, so go check it out. So 1 million Christians every single week. I tell you what, things are advancing, my friends. So here we are. We're reaching the end of this awesome study. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's liberated you. I hope it's encouraged you to be the change that God has called you to be. The bottom line is, things are getting better. Living in fear, associating prophetic scripture with current events, robs us of our God-given inheritance on this planet. Let us be the difference. Let us be the generation that makes this world an even better place. I don't know about you, but I want to be part of the difference. I want to contribute to change. I hope you do too. Thanks so much for watching. God bless. And take this planet to its next level of greatness.